Mr. Speaker, before I get into the meat of the discussion on the budget, the key document before us, I'd like to address the untruth I think by one of the members over there. I think it might have been Mr. One of them, I don't recall which one. The PVPC never denied or never said that there was not a pandemic. Never. And that we need to get over quickly, and we should
Honorable
probably
member, you may need to speak directly into the mic.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Mr. Speaker, thanks for the opportunity to have a say on this topic. Before we get into the budget discussion, I'd like to point out some inaccuracies, 2 or 3 minutes. One of the speakers over there claimed boldly and inaccurately, and I dare say I think he did it deliberately, that the PPPC denied that there was any pandemic. That never happened, and you can check it. That there was never such a denial. As a matter of fact, our radio station and all media supporting us, we actively took the call to our members to take the necessary precautions. Remember the big crowd that gathered to watch the ballot boxes that were being stolen? Remember how it was just about the time when the pandemic was unfolding, and the party took measures to get those people to come off the streets, although thousands of them wanted to come, and we did it in a very orderly fashion, as recommended by the Ministry of Health and WHO. So I'd like to bring that. That's if we speak about lies. I don't like to use that word here, but that might be one we need to address. Then again, he spoke about housing, implying that the PPPC did not have a housing policy. Remember, it was under Mr. Green, who was the then housing minister, that the Ministry of Housing of the PNC was scrapped. I'd just like to bring these things to the attention, especially of the younger folk here and the younger people listening and looking at us. Another inaccuracy, the PPPC had a housing minister. As a matter of fact, our present president was the Minister of Housing and Water. So those are 2 little inaccuracies I want to get over before I lose my voice cords. To a little swelling or a little not infection, but a little too much speaking over the past few days. Guyana is getting back on track, Mr. Speaker, after stressful and tenuous tenure of the 8th APNO AFC coalition. I've just exposed 2 of their lies, and I'd like now to turn to the budget. The budget currently engaging our collective here, and which is delivered by this honorable house by the minister, is one which was diligently, from all appearances, prepared by his hard-working team. And I'd like to join with those of us who recognize the hard work of that team, and most likely going into the nights and getting all the details and having to double-check them and triple-check them and so on. Thank you to that team. And this budget is one of the main tools of returning Guyana back on track at this present time. So I'd like to thank them for that. The budget, like all other budgets, is a costed plan. In other words, it's not just wishes that you want to give to the public or give to an audience, a particular audience, but you need to know where you're getting the funds, the monies to provide those things. So this is a costed plan, the budget, and it's coming at a challenging time. I'd like to remind you that this is a time when we're having the constraints in the economy and on basic life of the citizens brought on by the COVID pandemic. And this has enveloped and, as a matter of fact, smothered Guyana, not only enveloped, it is more than enveloping. It has smothered us, it is damaging the economy, and it is, of course, creating many other issues that we'll have to confront. Even mental health issues. Probably we are not fully aware of it, but there might be some mental health issues coming out of this stress. You notice, for example, there's an increase in domestic violence. My theory is that it's not that domestic violence will go in automatically, but it has been increased, it has become more brutal, spouses killing each other, not in the usual way of probably 1 or 2 chops, but brutality, multiple stabs and so on. So we are at particularly difficult times, and I'm happy that the Minister of Finance has been able to present this plan that is so detailed that I would want to close my eyes and support it. The government has already addressed the public health threat of that is pre-existing. That is, the budget is being presented at a peculiar time. Not only is there COVID, but the government and the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Finance were already having to put lots of resources on that epidemic of non-communicable diseases, chronic non-communicable diseases. So our population is at a stage where they're susceptible to that. chronic non-communicable diseases means diabetes or sugar, pressure, hypertension, and such things. They take a big slice out of our budget. And that's what we might refer to as the pre-existing conditions against which Dr. Singh and his team at the Ministry of Finance had to find monies to conduct the battle against two threats, two public health threats. The epidemic that was pre-existent and that unfortunately Guyanese were not aware of. We eat as we like, we drink as we like, but it's catching on, the changes are catching on. So I want to thank Ms. Dr. Singh for being able to generate funds and find the funds for the COVID response, even after doing such a great job, right, which was interrupted, of course, by the 5 years of the PNC in the fall, after doing such a great job of putting us, not a stop, but putting a spoke in the wheels of the growing epidemic of the chronic non-communicable diseases. Thank you for that. The government of Ghana had taken care to ensure that the monies being, or the funds being, and the efforts being given for COVID were not at the expense of the pre-existing epidemic of non-communicable diseases. Again, I must repeat, thank you, that's a great thing. In other words, both of the public health threats are provided for in this budget. We see more clearly where additional COVID things or COVID-related funds are being given. But if you look again, you'll see from the medical point of view, from the health sector point of view, that the chronic diseases are also taken care of. In other words, you would not want to save our granny from COVID, and then sorry. We would not like to lose a granny or a grandfather to the, or save them rather from COVID, only to lose them to the NCDs, like cancer, diabetes or pressure. So we have to take care of both. And I want to commend the ministry and its team for having been able to find a wherewithal, find the internal resources to do that. Congratulations on behalf of the medical profession, the health sector, and of course Guyanese, especially those who are suffering from chronic diseases. Now, I, on my own behalf, would like to recognize that particularly that this is something good to be done and that the doctor must be recognized for it. Yes, the minister and team were engaged in a lengthy process. We see it not only in the health sector, but in other areas. So I want to thank you, Minister Singh, and many of the things that I can repeat here were already mentioned by our speakers on this side, and I would like to reinforce that by supporting them. I'm confident that you and the Ministry of Finance Budget team met other stakeholders and that you are as diligent with them and mindful of their concerns as your team was when you met the health sector. In other words, this is not something being pushed down our throat. There was necessary time given to suggestions from the various line agencies. It's the term I think they use now. And so we want to thank you for that and hope that the other ministries will also endorse my comments on this regard, that the Ministry of Finance did take consideration of the suggestions, recommendations of the line agencies. Now, before I continue to some of the good things that are in this budget, the responsible minister, I'd like to turn to some of the things that we discovered, some of the negative things that we discovered. Very few examples to show what we are facing with, what we're trying to repair, the damage that we have to repair, right? The confusion, the lack of leadership, lack of vision, and so on. Simple ones, right? The storage of tons, big stock of lubricants by this administration in a building that was virtually a dwelling house, totally unsatisfactory, but they were there stored. And what's more, when we took over, we found that that item was almost expired, near expiry date. So because of that, we did further searches, and we found that this was not only one item, but they were in many different locations, ill-equipped and inappropriate for the storage of medications and medicines. We had similar concerns. So we're still looking at the damage that has been done, and probably we never have enough time and resources, especially human resources, to do the final tally. And people wonder now in the Ministry of Health, is it worth doing that? We've already lost these things. They're almost expired. I give you only one of the more glaring examples with not condoms, with the lubricants, right? What were they doing with so many lubricants? who ordered them. There seemed to be confusion. Many different people ordering from or doing the same work. So we're putting that in order, the bond, or what you call it, the material management unit. Now, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, rather, the health sector is being funded. The physical structures, we've seen that you have more equipment is being bought and new equipment, and I see there's an effort at standardization. I want to thank the minister for that. But at the same time, I want to say that equipment by themselves and even the best medications cannot do the job of providing us with good health care. You have to have the nurses, the doctors, and the personnel. And I'd like to note this, especially on behalf of the nursing profession, that there's been adequate resources to train and upgrade nurses. So what the government is doing, what the ministry has been doing, is not only creating the physical things, the infrastructure, not only providing the medications, but training. And that's a key component of the approach of the PVTC. It has always been emphasis on training. And this is being done currently in this budget and a continuation of other budgets from other times among the nursing profession and the doctors. So that's the new programs that have been added to the academic spectra of these two sections of the workforce. I'd like to thank the minister for that, and I'd like to use it to highlight to the doctors and nurses that the cost, many of these programs are free of cost to the participant, to the person who benefits, the beneficiary, and sometimes we take it for granted. But this is a good time to remind Guyana, to remind the parents, remind the recipients of this training, that is the nurses and the doctors, that they have a great duty to pay back this by way of good service to the Guyanese people. Now, Mr. Speaker, I've taken up a few minutes, and I think this is where I will stop. I think that's where I'll stop. We touched on the two major, the frontline workers of the nurses and doctors, and I'd like to recommend that we give them all the recognition necessary. And remember, they're the first who are needing the protective gear. They're the first who are needing, I want to talk of incentives, right, but they're the first who needing to have our recognition. Let's congratulate them. And I'd like, in the meantime, to fully endorse your budget and thank you for the great work. And not only that, the approach to listening to the people and the activists and the various stakeholders in the health sector. Thank you.